Welcome to the Vyne Theatre's Dance Legends series of interviews. I'm Ismene Brown, a long-time dance critic, and I'm here to look at the magic of the dance, the people who create that magic, and to find out what it is that lies behind the mystique. I want to talk to some of these fascinating magicians themselves to find out how they do what they do. And one of these is Sarah Wildor, a great Royal Ballet ballerina, one of the most exciting people I got to watch in the 90s and in the early part of the 21st century. She was the Royal Ballet's homegrown star, a shooting star, a star actually from the moment that she left the Royal Ballet School. She was a captivating comedian, a moving, dramatic heroine, and an unusually musical dancer. In a wider art sense, Sarah Wildor also embodied the kind of English ballet school that was at the time being explored, challenged, developed by an influx of many international dancers. And when she resigned from the Royal Ballet, which we will discuss later, it was seen as something of a watershed moment, a significant moment when we discussed what British ballet was all about. But also, with those dramatic and stage gifts, Sarah was one of the very few ballet dancers to make a successful transition to musical theatre and to acting. First of all, this is the Royal Ballet poster girl. I don't know how many of you would walk down towards the Royal Opera House, and on the corner of that new building, you would see this enormous poster of Ondine, Sarah diving. It seemed to be about 20 foot tall, that poster. And in the corridor now, today, last week I was walking down, and there she is, Swanilda, in the display of posters of historic and important productions at the Royal Opera House. First of all, I should ask, did you actually go swimming to make that poster?
Yeah. That was at Crystal Palace Diving Pool. It was an experience I'll never forget, ever. Sorry, hello everybody.
Are you a good swimmer?
I'm not bad.
You can dive anyway.
Well, what they initially wanted me to do, so at Crystal Palace Diving Pool, they have windows low down, so people can see under the water, because obviously, they want to know what's happening. Their initial idea was that I would have a weight on my foot at the bottom of the water, and they were going to send divers in to just give me oxygen every so often. I thought, that's not really that cool. I'm really not into this. I think I did it once. So they put the weight on my foot. I was at the bottom. I thought, hey, a nice pose. And then I thought, I can't breathe. I want to breathe when I want to breathe. And when you suddenly think, when someone tells you you'll be fine, all you can think about is, I can't breathe. I can't breathe when I want to breathe. And so I just said, I don't want to do this. I've got another idea for you, which was, I'm going to dive down. I'll create images in front of that window. And that's how it worked. It was so much better. But it was exhausting because I was up and down in costume.
Did you feel, when you were there, like a starlet, like the new girl who just arrived, or getting on the posters? I mean, you were doing a lot of press and media at the time, too.
I loved it. I didn't think of myself as that. I think I just thought myself as seizing every opportunity. I knew I was really lucky. I just felt lucky. I felt, grateful, and I just wanted to do the work. I wanted to just get stuck in and to challenge myself from one performance to the next. I think that's probably more how I felt.
Let's start with you. As a young girl, very young there, absolutely adorable, 4-year-old, I think?
Yes, I was.
You were born in Essex. What got you into dance?
I think it was something that my mum wanted me to do to get me out of the house. I didn't do any other hobbies, to be fair. That was pretty much the truth. But I think I was just quite good at it, and I loved it. So it was a good combination. So she didn't need to get me there under duress or anything. I was happy to go, and then I wanted to go more and more frequently. And then somebody said she should audition for the Royal Ballet School. And that's kind of how it happened. It was like I was sort of catapulted.
Do you remember seeing a show that just caught your interest, that made you think, I want to be a ballerina?
I don't remember any. I suppose I did see Nutcracker. That was probably I think Nutcracker is quite pivotal for a lot of young girls and boys, hopefully more these days. Although I'm a little bit anti-Nutcracker these days. I think I'm so Nutcrackered out. But
well, you have an excuse because you were, at 13, you were on the Covent Garden stage as Clara. And in fact, that's very interesting. You were picked out by Peter Wright for that production. And he says in his autobiography that it was for you that he altered the Clara from a young dancer in the company to a young ballet student. He said you were awfully careful at first, and that he'd had to jolly you along.
Yeah, that sounds
Do you
about
remember
right.
that?
Yes. Yeah, he was wonderful to work with. I felt really lucky. I knew I was really lucky to get to do that. But tentative steps. Suddenly having to do stuff, to be partnered by a company member when I was 12, 13 was quite awesome.
Who was that? Was that
Jonathan Burrows.
Jonathan Burrows? So you were dancing that big grown-up Act 1 music.
It was kind of a love part of there, yeah.
Yeah, and it's massive music, which is why it's always so strange when you see a 13-year-old or a 14-year-old dancing it. Was it very overwhelming to dance to that music?
Yes, I loved that music. It really was. And, I mean, obviously you don't, at that age, I say that, you don't, I was probably more emotionally driven by the music rather than by him, as it were. But
was that the moment when you realised that your destiny would be to join the Royal Ballet, or was there still an element of doubt?
I think I was blinkered that way. I don't think I had any other alternative in my head at that time.
Did you learn just ballet, or did you learn for other options? Did you learn any musical theatre, dancing?
No, it was just ballet. We did do some contemporary a bit later on. These days they do much, much more.
Were you more ambitious than other girls in your class, do you think? Or was everybody very ambitious?
I think everybody was, but since this, and since I've been studying more recently, I've realised that one thing that I do have, and I think that is possibly beyond other people, and I don't mean this in a big-headed way, this is part of my personality, I'm really conscientious. So I will keep going until I've done it to awkwardly perfectionist levels. So maybe it's that. But I think a lot of dancers are perfectionists, so I'm not sure.
Were many of the giants of the Royal Ballet coming in and out when you were there? Because I know obviously soon after you joined the company, by then Ashton had died and MacMillan would die soon after, but did you have Fontaine in the classroom when you were a kid? Did you see her? Did you see Nanette de Valois?
I did see Fontaine perform, but she was a lot older then. I was mostly driven always by Anthony Dowell and Antoinette Sibley. They were my ultimate mentors. You
always seemed to me to be very much
yes.
in his blue-eyed girl.
Yes.
You felt that all the way.
I did. I think one of the things that was really nice was he had a very similar sense of humour to me, or I had a similar sense of humour to him. It was fun. I think there was kind of a bit of an affinity in the rehearsal studio, which always made it just a joy, really.
What did he coach you?
A lot of Ashton. So I did. The most memorable was I always was coached on Dream, Midsummer Night's Dream, with both Sibley and Dowell, and those rehearsals were really, really special to me, always.
When you went into the Royal Ballet, did you think, that's what I want, these are particular roles that I'm going to go for? Because by then, you'd had the big MacMillan dramatic heroines had been created, those roles had been created.
Did I have my eye on them? I think everybody watches them and visualises themselves potentially doing it. I didn't know whether I could until I did, I think it was a Matthew Hart piece, and that's where Kenneth saw me, and it was a piece that was, I think it was a bit of an experimental evening. I think I had to give birth or something like that in the middle of the stage. It must have been about young pregnancy or something. I hope I've not gone off on a total tangent here. I could have done. Anyway, I got noticed. Funnily enough.
So MacMillan noticed you in this role, and did he actually speak to you and ask to coach you
I think he then selected me to do Juliet after that.
Juliet first, and then after that was Princess Louise in Milo.
Oh no, maybe that was first. No, Juliet was after Louise. Oh, see, I get very confused.
Well, Princess Louise was one of the things that I noticed first from you, I think, was Princess Louise in Myling, which is probably MacMillan's most complicated ballet. There are a large number of women, and one of them is his first wife, is Princess Stephanie, and at the wedding ball, the engagement ball, he dances insistently with her younger sister, Princess Louise. It's just one number, but it is, you made such a thing of it. You could almost see all the danger that was going to unfold ahead of Rudolph and his sort of obsession with collecting notches, as it were, on his bedpost. And the way you just succumbed, it was a really complex way of dancing it. And that little role, you found a huge amount in it. Do you remember feeling that about it? It was just the way you are.
Oh, thank you. No, that's really nice that you say that. I always wanted to do that with every role that I got the chance to dance. I think it was one of those where I knew it was an opportunity that I couldn't let up, and it was dangerous. It was also really hard. So the more that I imagined myself as the personality and as the character, the less the steps seemed difficult, and that it kind of lessened and diminished the difficulty of the technical, and it enhanced the characterization.
At first, a ballerina has to put up with an awful lot when she ascends to the giddy heights. She's got to be chickens and fille, la fille margade, which you were. That may not be you in the costume, I can't swear that you're one of those chickens. I can't swear that you're one of the squirrels either, but you have been a squirrel in Tales of Beatrix Potter.
Absolutely.
And you have certainly been a carrot. In fact, you have been the carrot. I'm not sure anybody else has ever been a carrot.
Yeah.
And of course you've been in that, I think you are fairy breadcrumbs, aren't you there? So I was going to say it's food is also part of the equation. The ascent to, it's quite undignified really, the things you have to do.
Oh,
and a signet, my word, you must have been a signet more often than most people.
Yes, we did signets. It was 4 of us. I mean, obviously there's many groups, but my 4, we did it so many times, touring. I mean, we were like a little dream team of signets, and we were so in sync. But I loved it. It was a great piece.
Why did you love it? The signets looked just devastating. You're just waiting for somebody to make a mistake.
I know, it literally is. It is that. But I think because we were a good team, we were really united and united front and very, very rhythmical, heads, everything together. It was so important to us, that sort of teamwork. And actually, so I think Leanna Palmer, she went to the original dance school, the same as I did. Michelle Davis, she also went to the original dance school in Essex. There were 3 Essex girls in that signets team. Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? So there must have been something that we kind of, we all had a...
What did you get from being in the corps? I mean, some dancers who come into companies, and it's often happened with at the Royal Ballet, they've come in and haven't been through the corps. What do you get?
The corps is it's incredible because when you dance as a group, the emotional force and the drive that sort of underlies all of that, it's multiplied by, 30 ladies, and you become that one sort of thundering unit, I suppose. I mean, if you think about Act 4 of Swan Lake, that swelling music when they all run on chasing the prince, it's absolutely overwhelming as a united front when you run on as a group. I mean, obviously you can feel that as one, but when you know it's that powerful force of 30 plus females, it's quite awesome. I loved being in the Corps de Ballet. The only time I'm thinking that I didn't was when you all had to, when you're all together, but you have a hard thing to do. Like I remember you had to suddenly turn to the side and lift your leg on count 3 in arabesque, and you think, oh my God, am I going to be 3.5? Am I going to be on count 4? Am I going to be that one that you notice because I haven't done it right? It's quite pressured.
There's some great jokes about the corps de ballet in that Jerome Robbins piece, Berkhamsted, but also obviously the ballet Trocadero are very good at anatomizing where things can go wrong in the corps de ballet.
Yeah.
And yet I never see any errors from the corps de ballet. I have occasionally seen people fall down, but I have not seen people do the wrong steps in a very noticeable fashion.
No.
I really don't understand how that doesn't happen more
No,
often.
I agree, because it would be more noticeable. And that's the fear with corps de ballet, is to not be the one who stands out for going wrong.
So you are actually dancing in a state of fear a lot of the time in the corps de ballet.
Yeah.
But your career was very interesting, that you were still doing these sort of strange switches from the corps de ballet to lead roles, or very obvious standout roles. For instance, 1993 to 4, which is your breakthrough season, you had your first Juliet and your first Titania, and you were Irina in Winter Dreams. But you still had to go on being Juliet's friend in other shows, one of anonymous 6 or 8 people, or even a squirrel on other nights. And then in 95 you debuted as Giselle, as Manon, and as Chloe, but you were still doing the 4 signets in Swan Lake.
Yeah.
So is that bewildering? I mean, do you feel that you're not sure whether are they just constantly testing you out, or do you feel that there's confidence that you'll soon be able to leave these core parts behind?
Oh, that's a really interesting question. I think it probably kept me really grounded most of the time, so I could never feel complacent that I'd left those roles behind and I was doing the lead ones. Yeah. I think it did keep me grounded. I think it probably frustrated me. I would say it was an influx of many emotions that came with that.
So they were doubts sometimes. You did think, oh, I was Juliet last week and now I'm Juliet's friend. Does that mean they've got no faith in me?
Gosh, this is a dancer's world is full of self-doubt because it's such an aesthetically judged art. Yes, now that you say that, I've never really thought about that before, but I actually think it did make me less confident in where I was going, and more grateful when I got the chance to have a go.
Now, when you did start to get leading roles, one of the things you became sort of almost the paragon of was the sweet young thing. And sweet young things are throughout ballet. Most of the leads, in fact, quite a lot of the leads are, especially the tragedies, are sweet young things. Giselle, Juliet, Daphnis and Chloe. This is the young girl in The Two Pigeons. She's a sweet young thing. Vera in A Month in the Country, and of course Anastasia, who doesn't finish off sweet, but is distinctly a sweet young thing. How did you, as a kind of modern girl, I mean, they're mostly sort of powerless marriage material, quite often victims of men and all that. Do you dancers discuss with each other how to cope with such very unmodern characters, how to bring them to a modern audience?
No. Dancers don't tend to discuss those things. It tends to be very much your take. I don't know. People have individual ways of working. But for me, it was, I'd have the dancer approach and then I'd have the characterization approach. So the coffee shop would be a place where I would probably listen to the music and understand the emotional drive of the character and what they were trying to say, the intention, the purpose of what you're trying to say, the communication side of it. Technically, the studio was the place where all the steps were honed, I'd say. And then I also had a thing where I never wanted to completely engage with the character in the studio. I wanted to just save that bit to live on the stage, just so that it had something real about it that hadn't been practiced. So it was a feeling that was building and then it would.
So no two performances would be the same?
No. And also that depends on how your partner reacts to you as well. So if your partner doesn't react, because you can't set those things, which I didn't like to set. I like to have that moment of, how's he going to react when I come at him? And then that would change the way you did the movement the next time. It was so much more lived. I really enjoyed that.
But is it difficult to find an authentic way into these essentially powerless girls.
Yes.
I remember Sylvie Guillem told me that she lost interest in some of these classic roles because she could add nothing convincing in character to the prescribed steps, and that the steps on their own weren't interesting enough without those things. I mean, she says she described Odette as being, she said, I'm not interested in a woman who just arrives when a man essentially puts up his hand and says taxi, and, you know, she arrives. And I mean, in a sense, that's what these girls do in these. So I don't know how a lot of people don't think that ballet is such an appealing thing to modern audiences because these girls are essentially not very believable as characters.
Yes, because we can't really relate to them so much these days. Being that sort of idyllic, innocent being that doesn't have underlying thoughts and feelings is really hard to relate to now, I think. But then they can be changed. They can be changed to project that, you know, perhaps, you know, you can watch a character and think, she looks innocent, but I can see there's something behind the eyes. I can see there's something more to that character, or her innocence is there, but is it? I don't know, it's something that leaves questions.
Were any of them ones that you really just had to deal with on the face of it and just leave them there and just put them on stage, and others that you could actually develop?
Beauty, a bit. I mean, I didn't do Sleeping Beauty, actually. I did a lot of the sort of excerpts in Sleeping Beauty. That's one that's always frustrated me. I just think, just because it just didn't explore the darker underlying fairy tale. So yeah, Beauty used to frustrate me because it felt like it was, you know, about the technical excerpts.
This is Princess Aurora, obviously, in the Sleeping Beauty, yes. The other route for the soloist is up through, as it were, the servants' quarters, because we know that ballet has plenty of class in it. And this is a little episode here that of you dancing in A Month in the Country. It's about 2 minutes long, and you're dancing as Katia the servant, though in fact Vera, you usually danced the girl, the aristocratic girl of the house, but in this particular case, you were dancing Katia. There's a lot of steps.
It's so fast. We were in sync though, because I quite like that. That's the thing about Bruce. He was so good at sort of reading his partner and being together. It was nice to work with him.
One of the things that I find unusual about that is there are so many folk inflect steps.
Yes.
And Ninette de Valois was extremely keen on folk and national dancing at the school. I'm not sure if they do so many now, but it was very much, she felt it was an absolute core part of the learning to become a ballet dancer. And I wondered if that was something, why you looked as if you were loving doing it. There seemed to be a great deal of affection in the way you were doing that.
I think so. I really like the sort of national, the character and all of that. I think it's the rhythm. It forces you to be very on the music, very fast, footwork and things like that. And as you say, something about it develops the character, brings out the enjoyment. I think it's possibly that.
It breaks you out of the convention of being ballerina face, doesn't it? But the other thing is I thought it was an interesting long ball forward to you eventually moving into musical theatre, that ability to transcend the ballet prescription and just react to the audience and react to the steps and the joie de vivre. The other subdivision is minxes, of which you had more than your share of minxes. And I always associate naughty. Sorry, that's a sort of very quaint sort of word, like dainty. But actually, naughty and dainty are lovely words to use about dancers who move with such fastidious, knowing exactly what they're doing to the audience. And you were the most wonderful Titania. Obviously, your Swanhilda got you on the poster. You were Lisa and Ondine, as we know, and also Manon, who was sort of the ultimate minx. And when you first did that, it was very interesting. You were still very young. You just stepped out on that stage, and it seemed to me you owned it. You got out of the wagon, running out in that pale blue virginal dress, and your eyes swept around the audience, and I thought, wow, Manon has arrived. Did you feel that? You owned the part.
Yeah, I just loved Manon. I loved it so much. I loved the journey through the ballet as well. That kind of constant realization. She's like insight moments all the way through it for her, where she's sort of playing with what she wants, what she feels, and not knowing the right path to take, and just going for the emotional one, or the one that she can't help herself. And everybody knows what that feels like, but it's so nice to visit the dark depths of her life for that. I loved Manon. I'd say that's possibly my favourite to ever dance. She was, she is. She's just, I suppose it plays with everything that we do today, which is, the materialistic things versus the things you know are right. And then, of course, the realisation that you chose the wrong path. Yeah.
Isn't it? She's a rare one in which one can extract a huge amount of tragedy from her story, because it is essentially what one, as you say, she doesn't realise how much power she has over men, and then she plays with it and just goes too far, goes over the edge and loses a lot. Obviously, a lot of that is to do with the social times.
Yeah.
But generally speaking, it's not so easy to get deep feeling out of these wittier parts, and generally it's about the innocence betrayed or that's fallen.
When I did The Dream, I used to love making her really powerful, so she was as strong as Oberon, because I thought this is the modern take, isn't it? He might be partnering her, but is he?
Let's talk about dancing pure classicism, because this is a completely different challenge, isn't it?
Yeah.
You haven't really got character to play with. You haven't got a story, really. You've got quality to embody. Now, one fairy in Sleeping Beauty that you've danced a lot was this one fairy, Miette qui tombe, the breadcrumbs fairy, or generosity fairy. I haven't got any tape of you here, but it's a minute and a quarter of amazing difficulty. And this is Fumi Kaneko of the Royal Ballet in a recent recording. So we'll just look at this now. Do talk over it. I mean,
yeah. So this is painful. The challenge of hopping on point. Yeah. But what I used to love about this solo is the music. So because it's so kind of delicate, it dictates the whole thing. And that's the thing about doing classical, technical things, then it's the music that takes you through. off the music. Oh, she's lovely.
And how are you feeling at that point where you've just got to the end of it? Are your toes burning?
Yeah, it does hurt. And also because you have to have that kind of flexible ankle. So you have to hop on point, but you can't hop on point when it's fully extended, otherwise you'll go over. So it has to kind of have, we used to call it the trog position. So it's kind of half pointed, but you've got to be able to hop on it and still make it look pretty.
I think the thing I wanted to pick out is that these variations seem to me to be the sort of pinnacle of Petipa's classical technique. How do you approach showing this very difficult, tiny skill, which is the hopping, and at the same time try to embody this other quality, which is what the fairy is bringing to Aurora's wedding? I mean, do you find yourself so focused on the technical perfection of each of these steps that actually you've just got to trust that you've got the general mood right? Or is there something else that you sort of use to carry you through?
On a solo like this, it's almost like you're splitting yourself in two. So you've got the lower part of you, which is doing this hard, technical, very musical, technical steps. The top part of you is the legato, the music. So I suppose it's like you've got it's playing with the music. So the sort of staccato things that are going on, that's your hopping. And then the top part of you is the strings.
What happens if the conductor goes slower or faster than you were expecting?
You grit your teeth and get on with it. Yeah. Yeah, that was always harsh because you wanted the music to be ideal, but it's never ideal. It's always live, and that's the beauty of live theatre.
Did the classical ballerina side attract you as much as these other more character-led ones?
No.
Because I noticed that, for instance, I think you did 3 of the 7 big ballerina roles that the Royal Ballet had productions of at the time, but you didn't do things like Don Quixote, and you didn't do The Sleeping Beauty, and you didn't do Swan Lake Lead or La Bada, which was on also at the time. Were these roles that you would have sort of just said no to? I mean, I know some ballerinas do. Or what roles have you missed?
Odette, I'd say.
Yes.
I don't really have any regrets. I think I was so lucky I got to do the ones that I really, really loved.
Whether large or small, your roles, it's all about leading the audience. And I've picked out a few quotes, critical quotes, 1 or 2 of which may have been mine. Sarah Wildor has arrived. She's a truly astonishing artist who can lead an audience anywhere she wants to take them. And that seemed to me to be exactly what the artist must do. There was an interesting comment in the Sunday Times. Your approach to fairy tales is more Brothers Grimm than Mother Goose, can slip from baffled Red Riding Hood innocence to wolfish glee in the space of a sentence.
I'd say that pretty much sums me up. Yeah.
And then about your Ondine takes a jazz soul to bring the nymph to life. Do you think that that was something you always knew you had to do, or is it something that some great ballerina taught you when you were a child?
I think I did learn a lot from watching others. I was probably quite a good observer of what I thought I'd like to emulate and what I thought I wouldn't. So yes, definitely that was learned, I think, as I progressed and watched.
I mean, you were surrounded by a lot of big names, not only when you were coming through school, but also in the company. We had Sylvie Guillem had just arrived when you came into the company. Irek Mukhamedov had just arrived, inspiring the men. Did you find, and I think there was obviously a big push to get Darcey Bussell as the sort of tall British Sylvie Guillem lookalike, initially at least. Did you feel that, were you all learning from each other? Were you all sharing dressing rooms and being friendly with each other? Or did you have a feeling that it was a particularly competitive time? Because it did look competitive.
Did it?
Yeah.
I didn't feel that particularly. I felt like we all had a place, like we all had a little different identity that we all embodied, I would say. Unless that was me in my own little world, which is quite possible. I always felt that I embodied the identity of the character and the drama and the storytelling.
You were being coached by people like Lynn Seymour
Yeah.
and Antoinette Sibley. I mean, it must have been tempting to kind of follow them and
Yes.
do what they said.
Yes. They were amazing, actually, because some people do that. They sort of say, this is how it was, this is how it should be done. And I'm really mindful to never teach like that when I teach. I just think you can't ever do something the same as somebody else, and you should never. But you can take the essence of what somebody else is saying works or has worked. But I mean, someone like Lynn, she was so brilliant. She was really only interested in the person who would listen to her words and then take them on board and do with it what they wanted to do. It was really like almost the opposite of that. She didn't want you to just be a sort of replica of what she'd done. It was like she wanted to see that you'd understood, the essence of what MacMillan had initially wanted, and then what were you going to do with that? How were you going to embrace it and project that to the audience?
Was it hard to find partners who would share your attitude, your approach of this kind? Because you do depend so much, don't you? The ballerina is doing all the work, the man is standing behind her. He can make her look good or he can make her look bad.
Absolutely. I did do an awful lot with Michael Nunn, and he was very like-minded. So we had a ball,
Now the ballet boys, yes.
Yeah, now,
Or later the ballet boys, I should say. Probably I think past that stage now.
Yeah.
So what did you dance with Michael Nunn?
I did Manon. I did a lot of Manon. Juliet.
You also danced with Roberto Bolle.
I did Manon.
And lest we forget, quite early on you danced with Adam Cooper, who's now your husband.
Yeah.
One of the things you introduced, as it were, to partnering in some quite scary ways. I mean, when you were, one of your early lead roles was in The Invitation, and MacMillan, you became very much a ballerina of MacMillan roles. The Invitation was one that not many girls would be cast in. I mean, it was a difficult ballet to bring off. Obviously, Lynn Seymour coached you on that too. But when you were first being partnered as a young girl, being essentially attacked by an older man, how were you able to work that into your understanding of what partnering was? Was it all mapped out for you very carefully, step by step, or was there any of this recreation that had to go on stage?
Oh, it's really interesting because dancers, when they dance together, it's such a team thing. And so when I was cast in that, I was the young girl, and I was cast, and I had to be raped, dance-wise, obviously, by the husband, who was played by Adam Cooper, who was at the time my partner, which was a very interesting dynamic. So we were lucky, though. We were very close, and we used to talk about it all the time. We'd go home and discuss how we were going to do this. What does it mean? What we're trying to say? So by the time we got into the studio, it was real. It was really real. And I remember being told, when you bore after that rape scene, when you bore her off, don't make it too real. And I thought, okay.
I remember that was something that Lynn Seymour said about also the Judas tree, that it was very important in ballet not to be stuck in ballet convention. And she said about Juliet, didn't she, when you die, death is ugly, you know, and if you've been attacked, then you are bruised and you don't move in the same way, and it's got to happen in the ballet.
Absolutely. And there's a beauty in that, because people can associate life events or anything to that. It doesn't always have to be beautiful. And it also enhances the beauty when it's there. The ugly's great.
Nowadays they have intimacy coordinators, I think, in ballet companies dancing MacMillan.
Do they? That's interesting.
Supervising and plotting every move so that dancers don't feel too upset by it.
Oh, but that's good to feel upset by it. As long as you have the resilience to cope with it afterwards. My husband's laughing at me. I can see.
I think it's what Alfred Hitchcock said, it's only acting.
It is only acting.
Now, one of the things that I wanted to ask you about was your musicality, because the plot, in a sense, there were a lot of plotless ballets that you danced, and I think the sheer range of ballets without a story that you dance shows your very, very great musicality, your depth and your range musicality. I mean, these are 4 different choreographers. You've got MacMillan at the top, then there are 2 of Balanchines, There is William Forsyth and Ashton, who obviously we'll move on to. But this is a picture from Concerto, and that's what the first page of Piano Concerto No. 2 looks like. And I thought it looks like the kind of blank page that a dancer must almost sense feel when they come to a plotless ballet. Take us through what happens when you get cast in a plotless ballet. With a story, you can read the story, can't you?
Yes.
But what happens with this? Do you take the CD home and listen to it again and again and again, or do you just go in and sort of learn the music as you dance to it?
It's a mixture, but it is very, very music orientated, and also mood. So you have to kind of get a sense of the shape of the piece, and the dynamics that are required to keep it interesting, to drive it. Because some of them are amazing, aren't they? Concerto, I mean, the music is absolutely stunning for that. And Symphony in C, I absolutely love that. And I've taught that since to groups and summer schools and things, particularly because it's so musical and it forces people to be exact, dynamic. And I guess, I think when it comes to these sorts of pieces, you watch them as if the dancers are the music and they bring it to life.
But Duo Concertante is one of the most intriguing musical dances I've ever seen. By Balanchine, it's two dancers, male and female, on stage, violin and piano. And the violin and piano play for a while the dancers sort of loaf and hang about and listen, and then the dancers appear to pick up the music as it catches their attention. And then they come in and out, and then they stop and wait, and then they go back in again. And it's a kind of separate conversation almost. It's a conversation with the musicians, and yet a conversation with each other as well about whether to take part or not. And it is such a difficult one to bring off, but you looked as if you loved it, and that music is hard.
Yes, thank you. I did love it. I think, again, that was very much, it had to be really sort of honed in the studio because, as you say, that comes together with the partner very much, so that you work together on how you want to show or communicate what you're saying together to the audience.
This piece here, again, this is a 2-minute extract, the opening of Ashton's Symphonic Variations. And this was not just a piece set to music. This was a very sort of distilled experience of the perfect British post-war ballet. And it was created in '46 as a sort of sigh of relief and hope after the devastation of the Second World War. And here, we can talk about this afterwards. Just watch this first two and listen. This is a perfect coordination from start to finish.
I have a funny story about that.
Go on then.
I remember I had to do my own hair for that. And you don't go off stage for about 25, 30 minutes. Every time somebody else dances, you just stand at the side and wait in a position. You get cramp in your leg, and then you have to do a développé. Oh, it's agony. And I knew my hair was coming out, and pin by pin they would just drop. And I knew it was coming out. And I thought, I can't leave the stage. I can't do anything. I literally can't will my hair to stay up. And it got to the last bit at the end, double pirouette, finished. All hair out. It literally fell. It was just the worst feeling ever in the world, but I've never forgotten it. It was excruciating. I couldn't blame anyone either. It was just myself. I didn't pin it.
I remember a wonderful event of Darcey was dancing The Sleeping Beauty, and it was the Bjornsson production of the late 90s. Very, very complicated costume. And she was just finishing her solo in the Act 3, the wedding. And the net of her coronet obviously got caught in the top layer of her skirt. And as she finished, she was trying to do pirouettes across stage. She was going like that. Her skirt was going up, her hair was coming down, and she actually, in the end, she just finished and she just sort of bowed and just burst into laughter because the entire costume and the crowd, everything had fallen off.
Nothing you can do. It's just awful. And I also had, in Ondine, I remember I had a similar experience where my dress was just this little bit of chiffon that was sort of attached to the little bustier, and it just slowly came down. And in the end, it was just like in a pool. I was in an all-in-one in the end with a skirt around my ankles. And I kept sliding on it. Because, trauma.
The Symphonic Variations film, which comes at a crucial point, 2000, when you were really peaking. You were looking marvellous. You were dancing great, great leading roles. And Alina Koshikaru just arrived. She was 19. Tamara just arrived. She was in her mid-20s. And had been a very difficult time in the late 90s when the Royal Ballet had to leave the Royal Opera House because it was closed for big refurbishment, and the Royal Ballet had danced in some strange and demanding new venues in which you couldn't make any money. At one point, the finances got so bad that it was even talked of that they were going to either turn the Royal Ballet part-time or even close the company temporarily, completely. There was, at that point, a big row, I think, a sort of artistic row going on as to the place of the English school in the repertoire. And I remember interviewing Anthony Dowell, who said, Ashton doesn't sell. And they were doing less and less Ashton. And there seemed to be a story building up of a more international requirement, a more global face on the Royal Ballet. And you were a representative of this English style. In that recording, all the news was about Alina's new arrival and how exciting it was to see her. But what struck me in that recording is that you were the one who was absolutely in the music and in the steps. And there's a wonderful pirouette just at the end there, when you're putting your arm up, and if your arm just keeps going up. It's just beautiful. It's like a wisp, and I've watched that several times, and I thought, this was what I thought of as your ability to put music into your body and bring it out for us to feel, really.
Yeah, and I think you're right. There was a definite sort of shift, and I suppose it's kind of escalated now because it's very much sort of competition orientated, isn't it? The whole of the dance world is quite different, much more fired up by technical ability. I hope it's not just that, but yeah.
I mean, ballet is a broad church, isn't it? It's got to absorb so many different influences: folk dancing, national dancing, contemporary, classical ballet, neoclassical ballet, and of course the crossover styles that the fusion styles you always see, Akram Khan and so on. But I mean, when you left, what was very interesting was that when you left, when the new director was brought in from Australia to the Royal Ballet, Ross Stretton, who clearly didn't know the Royal Ballet repertoire at all, and in fact it was one of the reasons why I was appointed. I think he was supposed to be a new broom. When you left, which was not to most people's taste that I knew, we felt that this was a kind of cultural shock that was going on here. In fact, Stretton only stayed a year. He went and was replaced by Monica Mason. But you felt you were leaving with a lot more to give.
Yes, and a lot more to explore, I think. I was very settled with Anthony Dowell. He made me feel comfortable, and he made me feel that I had an identity. I don't like change that much. I love familiarity, and it makes me feel that I've got a really good base from which I can just express everything. And I think that was a bit of an upending when Ross Stretton took over. Everything felt strange, everything felt different, but it almost felt like I was approaching 30. It's one of those ages, isn't it, where people think that it's not too late to explore something else. Now I think 30 is really young. But I think, yeah, it was kind of a pivotal time for me where I thought, do I do it now? Perhaps this is the time.
But did you feel conscious of being the sort of flag bearer for English ballerina
yes,
style?
Yes, I kind of did.
Was that a bad pressure or good pressure?
Probably bad, because I thought, does that mean I don't move with the times, or what is the identity of the Royal Ballet at that point? I'm not sure. It was shifting, wasn't it? So, yeah, it was a change. It was kind of opportunity as well as discomfort, I'd say.
It was a bit of a binary argument, I thought, going on. That there was I think it had probably grown out of those financial problems at the Opera House in the late 90s, that the idea that by going global, by doing the big relays, Irek Mukhamedov had come from the Bolshoi. He was their great leading man who had come to the Royal Ballet. Sylvie Guillem had come to us from Paris Opera Ballet as Nureyev's favourite. The internationalism that was being attracted into London was clearly a new marketing tool, and I think that seemed to become very much central to also the concept of where the art should go. But I remember when Mukhamedov arrived and was making all the noise, and much as I adored his work, I thought he was a tremendous artist, I wrote a piece for the Telegraph that was asking the public to value Bruce Sansom's beautiful Ashtonian sort of finesse, as well as this marvellous Russian power. And I actually got a thank you letter from Anthony Dowell, but I was making a similar point a few years later when you left, because it seemed to be comparing, sort of downgrading the idea of your Ashtonian. It wasn't Ashtonian, also MacMillan girl through and through, but there was this sort of a finesse, a daintiness, a wit that seemed to me to be badly compared with a more athletic, sort of all-purpose global future. Probably a false argument that was going on at the time, and it was thrown up by the Stretton appointment. But when Monica came in so soon after that, did you want to go back? Did you get an invitation? Did you approach with an idea of reviving?
No, I think it wasn't at all like that for me. I think I needed to really detach myself in order to be able to sort of take on a new identity, I think.
You had already done, of course, Cinderella, taken leave of absence in the late 90s to work on Cinderella. This was very interesting because Matthew Bourne, he was kind of almost reluctantly persuaded by you because he imagined you as a Royal Ballet ballerina not being what he wanted.
And 1, 2, and 3, and 4. Sarah, who's come into the company just to do this project, is known to be the young thing at the Royal Ballet that everyone so admires. She's not here because we've grabbed her. She's a great actress. She's unusual. She's different from all the other ballerinas at the Royal.
Acting ability is no doubt about it. It's absolutely extraordinary and most unusual. There's a point that was also made by Susan Stroman when she cast you, a major role for you, wasn't it? After you left, your career almost burst onto the West End with Contact, which was a Tony Award-winning musical which had been staged in New York by Susan Stroman and John Weidman, and was the hottest ticket in Broadway. And Susan Stroman said to me, Sarah has great vulnerability and her speaking voice turned out to be wonderful. She said, I needed good ballet and a wonderful actress and got the best of both from her. And this was a wonderful role, was it? Tell us, did you move? You were the middle part. It was a three elements of this musical, 3 episodes about women and their effects on men or vice versa. And you played the downtrodden...
Yes, the abused wife. So she was out with her husband having a dinner in a fancy restaurant, and throughout the whole thing it kind of moves, it shifts into her imagination. So the waiter comes over and gives them their food, the husband would say something sort of probably degrading to her, and in her head she would go off with the waiter. So then it becomes imagination, so and everything, and it was wildly wonderful to do.
Did you feel that you'd really made the right step at this point, with Bourne under your belt and with this under your belt?
I think it was just all a big adventure that I really relished, really. To use my voice, that was different, because dancers, it was, at that point it was all about, the biological motion of the body and how to use the body, but then using the voice with it. It's weird hearing yourself speak as a dancer because you just don't. And I noticed that on interviews that I've done before, I'm so monosyllabic, I don't say anything. I just... so yeah, I had to learn to hear myself speak, which was really rotten, but I got used to it.
Because you were now doing quite a lot of musical theatre and in particular now working with Adam, who was coming into his own as a choreographer and as a director as well. You were beginning to work with him much more than you'd ever done at the Royal Ballet.
Yes. And
creating roles in which you were speaking and acting.
I mean, we just used to rehearse together. It was we lived our careers at home as well a bit. Kind of went on the adventure together. I do remember one performance when we did, and I remember saying to him, "Oh, I saved that, didn't I?" I remember saying, "I saved that because you forgot your line, didn't you?" And he went, "Darling, you just missed a whole chunk. You thought you saved it, but I saved you." I was like, ah! Did you keep up with old ballet friends at the Royal Ballet and get a sense of what they thought about your new career? I didn't really. I kind of severed ties to a certain extent. I mean, not in a bad way, but I think, I just felt like it was something that I needed to do. I've always been a little bit like that. When I make a decision and I fly with it. And even if it wasn't the right one, I will make it the right one. I don't know why I do that, but I do.
So ballet, by that stage, you decided that was then and this is now.
Yes.
You weren't going to go back to it?
No.
Never tempted?
No, I don't think so. And I think also by then, because I had a very bad back injury when I was 16, I had 2 stress fractures either side of my spine. And had I not recovered from that, I think it can escalate into something very bad. So I was in a plaster cast when I was 16 for a year, from under my armpits to my hips. I never had a great back after that, but it was good enough. But I think it takes its toll when you're doing, 31 arabesques down a slope in Bayadere. After a while, it does come back to bite you on the bottom a bit later on. So my body didn't love it by the time I was 30. So I knew that going back to it probably wasn't going to be an option.
But these skills, you're minimising them, but actually the skills of being able to talk, sing, act and dance. I mean, it's not for nothing. It's rare that they say there's a triple threat in the house, but you're obviously, you had
I can't sing though.
I thought you sang something, didn't you?
I did have to sing in an audition once. And literally, I remember doing an acting audition and they said, can you just sing a song? And I just make up a song on the spot. You know, when you go back and you think, what the hell? I did do that. I remember coming home, I'm still traumatised now. But
well, let's call you a double threat. Were they skills that you've just found that you'd got? Or did you have to work hard at them? Were there any that were frightening?
Yes, there was a lot that was frightening. And I think once I'd known that I'd committed to it, there was no going back and I was going to fully engage, which I did. I had quite a few auditions that I thought were hellish.
And got rejected?
Oh, yes. But one of my experiences was I did the dream as a play. So I did Titania as the ballet, and I also did the play at Ludlow, and that audition experience. That was kind of the things that she wanted us to do was just beyond anything I've ever experienced.
What sort of thing?
Oh, you'd have to do things in the studio that were, fully immersive. Those things that, people laugh about and say, God, I had to do that. I had to stomp around the room and shout and scream and that was me thinking, whoa.
So in fact, it's almost like you're going from an era in which you were very much accepted and you were largely smoothly progressing up to 2000 and 2001, but you're kind of like now you're in a new pool where there's sharks everywhere and you're being rejected and you've got to actually crank up an ability in yourself in your 30s when you've already got a great deal of status.
But I suppose you always feel vulnerable anyway, even if you're at your height. I think there's that sort of innate performer thing, which is you're constantly covering up self-doubt or denying it, but always feeling it. It's that perfectionism thing. So certainly, I think it wasn't that different. I still felt as vulnerable as I had done before. It was just that I had to actually hear the rejection.
When you started teaching, what did you bring to the classes, to the people you were interacting with, the youngsters? What did you bring from what you'd had from school? What were the good things you'd had from school, and what were the things that you'd actually learned were less good?
For me, it's really important that students understand that they're communicating. Otherwise, I just don't see the point. Because ballet is it's a language, so it is a structured language. But if you don't know what you're saying, it's not what you're doing, it's how you do it. That's what I try to teach, so that it's not just you doing an arabesque and running to someone in the corner. You have to understand what you're saying, why, the intention, the purpose, and all of that. That's what I try, because otherwise it is just a case of technical steps. It don't have any meaning.
You were talking there about the anxiety of going back into a pool of rejection and so on. And in fact, one of the things you threw yourself into another pool, which was academic work as a student, and you're currently completing a psychology degree. And your special interest is in performers' anxieties.
Yeah, I am interested in performance anxieties. I'm also interested in optimising performance as well. How to, bring out the best. How to kind of go from what you think is your pinnacle to beyond. I guess it crosses over into the sports world where they're often thinking about that sort of ultimate positive approach. I'm interested in that. I'm also interested in this whole kind of the perception of biological motion, how people see what the meaning behind the movement. So I think I could use it and bring it into the dance world.
I was wondering if you've always had an instinctive interest in psychology. I think that perhaps it has come out of every role you've done. You've just understood about getting behind the eyes of that person and looking into my eyes as the audience.
I do like. I'm interested in people. I think I'm a people watcher. I can just sit in a cafe and watch people. I find it really fascinating. Yeah.
Would having a realistic view of oneself and of life make one more or less likely to become a ballet dancer? I mean, you are entering this world where you must be constructing magical effects all the time. What's the place for realism in it?
Gosh. Oh, there has to be a place for realism. I think the new audience is wanting that. I think the new audience wants nothing less. You want to go to the theatre, you want to make contact, communicate, hear the stories, or watch the stories that are being told to you, but also be able to associate something in your life with that. I think realism has to be a part of that. And also, none at all, absolutely abstract in another way. But
it's still a magical world for you, being a dancer.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I've no regrets. It was the best time ever.